My name is Layla Noor. For years I buried this. Buried it in silence, in ritual, in the trembling breath between night and prayer. I buried it beneath shame I did not choose, beneath robes meant to protect me, beneath the call to worship that once made my soul rise like incense. But the wound would not stay hidden. Not in the marrow. Not in the memory. Not when he called my name in the dark. Yes, he called my name in the dark. And now I am bound to speak. Because what happened at the Kaaba was not just violence. It was a ripping of time. A rent in the veil between here and forever. It was the place where my body was taken, and where my soul was returned to someone I did not know, but somehow had always known. I was an Iram, wrapped in purity. My feet touched the white marble that had cradled centuries of devotion. And I thought, surely here in this place I am safe. Surely here, beneath the eyes of 1,000 angels, no harm could touch me. But the unthinkable happened, and I died while breathing. I shattered while standing. I vanished while praying. He dragged me behind the veil of sanctity, and in a place no eyes could see, he tore something that should never have been touched. I won't describe it. I cannot. But I left my body. That much I know. I left it like smoke leaves fire, slow, spiraling, silent. And as the blood dried, and the voices faded, and the weight of shame began to settle on the skin I no longer felt, something else came. Light. Not white light. Not blinding. Not soft. It was aware. And it wrapped around me, as if the heavens themselves had witnessed the defilement, and reached down to gather the ashes of what I had been. And that's when I heard him. The voice that shattered the silence. The voice that knew me. Not my name. My being. Not my words. My wounds. Not my religion. My soul. He called my name in the dark. I didn't see him, not at first. But I knew, whoever spoke was not from this world. Whoever spoke had pierced through dimensions, just to meet me in the hour of my breaking. I tell you this now with trembling lips and a vow on my breath. What happened next was not of this world. What happened next changed everything. Even now, I speak not because I want to. I speak because I must. Because when I returned, when breath came back, when pain returned, I was not alone. He came back with me, and his fire has not stopped burning in my bones since. So listen closely, not to me, but to the voice behind my voice, the one that still echoes, again and again and again. He called my name in the dark, and the time is now. Choose. I was devoted. Before everything, I was a daughter of the Quran. I learned to bow before I learned to run. My first memory is the scent of my mother's prayer mat. Worn velvet, always slightly damp with tears she never explained. I watched her rock in quiet rhythm, whispering names of God until sleep claimed her. And I would echo those names in secret, like lullabies to a father I had never seen but somehow feared. Our home was filled with silence and discipline, order and reverence. The call to prayer marked time more than the sun. Every corner of my world hummed with devotion. Stacked hadiths on the shelf, dates soaking in rose water, my father's voice correcting my tajweed before breakfast. I never questioned. I dared not. Obedience was our first language, and I spoke it fluently. Modesty was not a garment, it was my skin. Silence was not submission, it was survival. My family was proud of me. The quiet one, the careful one. Not loud like my cousin Huda who dared to wear color. Not bold like the boys who could ask and fail and ask again. I walked with my eyes lowered, and they said I was righteous. I buried my questions, and they said I was wise. But beneath my fasts and folded palms, beneath the crisp pages of the Quran I memorized in the dark, a hunger grew, not of body, of soul. It wasn't rebellion, it was ache, a longing too sacred to name aloud. During tearaway, while others wept over verses of fire and judgment, I found myself searching for something else, something buried in the spaces between the lines. A tenderness, a whisper, a face. And always, just as I was about to reach for it, the walls of doctrine would rise, tall and sharp, and I would retreat behind my certainty. Till I prayed, 5 times a day. I fasted, I covered, I honored, I obeyed. But somewhere in my prayers, a question kept curling like smoke in a sealed room. Is he listening, or am I just echoing? And I dreamed, God, I dreamed of Hajj, not just as ritual, not just as obedience, but as homecoming. I imagined the marble under my feet, the Kaaba towering like a black star in the night, pulling me into its gravity, pulling my sorrow into the mouth of the holy. I thought, if I could just make it there, if I could stand in that sea of white garments, if I could press my forehead to the stone of Abraham, everything would finally quiet, the ache would dissolve, the hunger would be fed. And then, the invitation came. My father's voice, unshaken as always. You've been chosen for Hajj. I cried that night, alone, not out of joy but recognition. Something inside me whispered, this will change everything. I didn't understand what that meant, not then, but something inside me was waiting to break open. A door had already begun to splinter in my soul. A name I had never spoken began to rise like breath before speech. And the hunger, buried for so long beneath ritual and robes and obedience, became unbearable. I clung harder to my routines, doubled my prayers, silenced the tremble in my chest. But it was too late. The veil had begun to lift, and somewhere beneath my skin, beneath my memorized verses and holy rhythms, a voice had already whispered. He called my name in the dark, and I was already answering. I arrived in Mecca on the 6th day. The air trembled with heat and devotion. Every breath carried the weight of ancient prayers. Every face around me moved like a wave pulled toward the center, toward the house. And I followed. I followed the current of the faithful, wrapped in white, pressed in sweat and hope, believing this was the moment I had longed for all my life. I stood before the Kaaba, and for the first time I was utterly still. The black stone rose like a living wound in the sky. Not a box, not a building, but a gate, a living, breathing gate. And I whispered every name I had for God. I whispered until my throat burned. I whispered until the name stopped meaning anything, and turned into sound, and the sound turned into silence. That night I could not sleep. Something inside me burned like oil catching fire. So I rose quietly from my group. The courtyard outside was nearly empty, just a few drifting pilgrims circling slowly, and the sound of water in the distance. Everything else was still. Everything else was watching. I wrapped myself tighter. I carried no phone, no water, no plan, only my prayer beads and the hunger I could no longer name. I found a corner near the edge of the courtyard, a place where the shadow met the glow. The marble beneath me was cool. The stars above the minarets were pale like dying eyes. And I knelt, and I wept, not loudly, not in anguish, just release. Years of pretending, years of silence, years of questions folded neatly into prostration. I wept like an offering, and for a moment I felt a strange peace descend. Not warmth, no. It was colder than I expected, but stillness. A stillness so thick I almost felt protected. Almost, until I felt breath. Behind me, not the wind, not the night. Breath. My body froze. My pulse stilled. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to know what had followed me into that sacred dark. But I knew. Even before the hand touched my shoulder, I knew. I cannot speak what happened next. There are no words that don't desecrate it again. But I can tell you this. It was like dying without dying. One moment I was flesh. The next I was light. I floated above the marble, above the limbs tangled below, above the trembling of my own voice trapped in my own throat. I watched my body struggle. I watched it surrender. And then I didn't watch anymore. I rose, higher than the courtyard, higher than the Kaaba, higher than thought. The lights of the holy site grew small, like candles flickering in the vastness of space. The sound of my breath was gone. The sound of the world was gone. There was only silence, and the slow, terrifying realization that I no longer belonged to the body below. I was severed, cleanly, without warning. And in that severing, a truth pierced me so deep it has never stopped bleeding. It wasn't just my body. My soul was torn from me. I floated in that space between worlds. Not heaven, not earth. Not time, not dream. Only awareness. Only memory. Only me without skin. And then, white. Not white. Not warm. But ancient. Living. It wrapped around me like a breath that had waited all eternity to be exhaled. And just as I began to disappear into it, just as the last thread of who I had been began to dissolve, I heard it again. That voice. The voice that had burned in my dreams as a child. The voice I had tried to suffocate beneath ritual and silence. He called my name in the dark, and I knew. I was not dead. I was chosen. But chosen for what I could not yet understand. Only that everything I had ever believed was cracking, and I was falling through the fracture. Through light, through pain, through the sound of my own soul being summoned, back into the hands of the one who never stopped watching. He called my name in the dark, and I answered, not with words, but with surrender. I drifted upward. There was no ceiling, no limit, just an unraveling of time, of self, of everything I had ever called me. There was no fear, only a quietness so vast, it absorbed every scream I never had the voice to release. And from within that quiet came a sound, and from within that sound came motion. Not violent, not sudden, just motion, like being drawn into the heart of a song. I didn't fall. I didn't fly. I was carried. The tunnel was not dark. It was not a tunnel at all, not as the world knows it. It was made of sound, of memory, of prayer. It pulsed with color and vibration, like breath turned into vision. The tunnel sang. It sang in tones I had never heard, but that my soul somehow remembered. A lullaby from before birth. A language that did not need words. A truth too whole to be spoken. And as I moved through it, I began to see them. Shapes at first, light-bound, suspended in the current, not swimming, not walking, simply existing. Some turned toward me, some turned away. There were no mouths, no eyes, but I felt watched, not in judgment, not even in curiosity. Watched like a candle watches the flame that lit it. Their presence calmed me. They did not speak, but their silence was filled with understanding, as if they had all wept with me, as if they had all once fallen, and all once risen. The air, or whatever it was, did not move, but it felt. It was thick with compassion, dense with the kind of love that terrifies because it sees everything and chooses to remain. The horror I had endured, the blood, the betrayal, the silence of those sacred walls, none of it followed me here. Not because it didn't matter, but because here, I mattered more. Here I was not what had been done to me. Here I was not defiled, not diminished. I was essence. I was soul. I was beloved. And the light, oh the light, it was not coming from one place. It was the place. It did not shine on me. It became me. It seeped into the fractures, the hidden places I had never shown even to myself. The light did not just see me, remembered me. I felt it in every thread of my being, this knowing, like the way a tree knows rain, like the way a mother knows her child's cry in a crowded room. I felt known, completely. And I wept, without eyes, without tears, a weeping that came from a deeper place than pain, a weeping that was not sadness, but recognition. And still the tunnel sang. I don't know how long I floated. There was no time. There was only before, and now was endless. The souls around me began to fade, not leaving, just stepping back, making room. And I understood that someone was coming. I felt the shift. The atmosphere deepened. Everything stilled. The light began to pulse, once then again, as if the heart of the universe had paused its beat to listen. And in that stillness, in that breath between worlds, I heard it again. Not a voice now, a presence, not outside me, but through me. He called my name in the dark, not as a stranger, not as a god, as the one who knew every scar, every shame, every hidden vow I had ever made in the dark corners of my mind. I was not afraid. I was undone. Undone by the weight of being seen so fully and still loved so completely. And I knew I had crossed over, not just into a realm, but into a truth too sacred for the earth to hold. The tunnel faded, and I stood, or floated, or existed before something so radiant. I could not look, and yet I did, because it was not light I saw. It was love, alive, awake, burning, and it had always been waiting for the moment I would be emptied of everything I thought I was, so I could finally remember what I have always been. He called my name in the dark, and I was finally ready to answer. And then, he appeared. Not walking, not descending, not emerging from light. He was the light. He stepped into my knowing, not into space. And suddenly, everything that had surrounded me bent toward him. He didn't speak. He didn't need to, because the moment I beheld him, I remembered everything I had spent my life trying to forget. He was not what I had been warned about, not the villain of sermons, not the idol of another path. He didn't carry weapons or scripture. He carried me, my name, my tears, my past, all of it already inside him. I wanted to flee, not out of fear, but because I felt exposed. Every part of me I had hidden, every doubt, every night I questioned God in secret. Every time I mouthed verses while my soul sat silent. He saw it, and not once did he look away. His gaze held me. It didn't grip me. It held me, like a cradle that knew how to carry broken things without letting them shatter again. I tried to retreat. I tried to tell myself this was illusion. This was deception. This was not for me. I was Muslim. I was devout. I belonged to the straight path. But there was no voice arguing with him. Only a deep, echoing stillness in me that whispered, "You've always known." This wasn't religion. This was reunion. He moved closer, still without words. He showed me my life, not as a list of deeds, not as a balance of sins and merits, but as a story of longing, of reaching, of silence in the midst of sound, of hunger in the midst of plenty. He showed me my childhood, the way I prayed with more hope than understanding. He showed me the nights I wept beneath my veil, begging God to just say something, even if it was in anger. He showed me my obedience, and how it came more from fear than from love. And then, he showed me the night at the Kaaba, not the violence, not the shame, but himself, watching, not stopping it, no, but never leaving. He was there, in the silence, in the cold marble, in the breath that left my body and entered the veil. He was there when my soul fractured. He was the hand that caught the piece that would have been lost forever. And in that moment I broke again, not in despair, but in awe, because for the first time, I felt clean, not because of what I had done, but because of who he was. He reached into the center of me, not with hands, but with knowing, and what he touched came alive. It was then I realized he knew the real me, not what I had been taught to be, not the modest daughter, not the memorizer of holy verses, not the obedient girl who kept her questions buried in silence. He knew the voice I had never spoken. He knew the name I was never given. He called my name in the dark, and now he was saying it in the light. And that name, that sound, was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. It was not Arabic. It was not human. It was recognition. And in that recognition I felt it, not conversion, but completion. He did not ask me to abandon anything. He simply revealed what had always been hidden underneath everything I thought I had to be. He did not erase my path. He fulfilled it. He did not shame my questions. He crowned them with answers too holy for words. And in his eyes, I saw not only myself, I saw everyone, every wounded soul, every silent girl, every seeker trembling in the dark. They were all there, in him. And I understood without being told. He was not a stranger. He was the source, the fire before the veil, the shepherd before the religion, the voice before the doctrine. And he was calling me home, not to a place, but to truth, to fire, to love, to him. I didn't speak, but my soul answered. And in that answer, everything changed. He called my name in the dark, and the darkness lost its claim on me. And then he spoke not with words, but with knowing. And everything I thought I knew began to crumble, not like a temple under siege, but like a veil slowly unraveling thread by thread, revealing something ancient beneath it, not new, not foreign, but forgotten. He didn't give me a scroll. He didn't offer scripture or instruction. He gave me a mirror, not one of glass, but of light. And in it I saw myself, not as I was, but as I had been before the world touched me. I saw a girl formed in brilliance, not stained, not shamed, but glowing with the breath of God, unspoiled, unapologetic, unafraid. And he said without speaking, "This is who you are, not the vessel used and discarded, not the shadow walking behind men, not the obedient silence mistaken for holiness, but beloved, chosen." Oh, and I wept again, not from grief but from recognition, because some part of me had always suspected that I was made for more than surviving. He showed me the hands that tried to mold me, the voices that said, "Be small," the gazes that taught me to shrink, The doctrines that told me my questions were sins, and my fire was rebellion. He showed me how they silenced the daughters, not with violence, but with forgetting, with the careful erosion of memory, with the steady pressure of shame. He showed me how they erased the womb from the altar, how they covered the prophetesses with dust, how they buried the wildness of God's daughters beneath systems, meant to make us holy, but not whole. And he looked at me again, that gaze that saw everything, and he said through silence, "You were brought here to remember what they tried to take, to remember that holiness is not silence, and purity is not pain, to remember that I was never filthy, never forgotten, never forsaken, not on that night, not on that floor, not when I couldn't scream, not when I couldn't breathe. He was there, in the ache, in the stillness, in the aftermath, and now he stood before me, not as an accuser, but as the keeper of my story. He opened a memory, not mine, not personal, but ancient, a stream of women veiled in flame, dancing, weeping, prophesying, some with babies on their backs, some with wounds on their wrists, all radiant. I recognized none of them, and yet, they felt like me. I understood without question. These were the ones before me, the ones they tried to erase, the ones who carried the truth like a torch in a storm, and passed it down in whispers, waiting for a daughter brave enough to speak it loud. You were brought here to remember. The words echoed, like bells in a temple I didn't know I carried inside me. He showed me my purpose, not as a preacher, not as a rebel, but as a rememberer, a witness to what they forgot, a midwife to truth, not to destroy what I was raised in, but to awaken what had been buried beneath it. This was not an attack. This was an invitation to go deeper, to go higher, to return to the fire. Because what I saw that night was not a new religion. It was a resurrection of the soul, of the voice, of the sacred image that still burned in me. Despite all the places it had been dragged through ash, he didn't ask me to abandon Islam. He asked me to see beyond the names, beyond the lines, beyond the fear. This isn't about religion. It's about truth. A truth so bright it cannot be labeled. A truth so intimate it must be revealed soul to soul, by the one who formed the soul to carry it. He didn't call me to a building. He didn't call me to a system. He called me to himself. And I knew everything I had ever searched for in the marble of the Kaaba, in the whispers of long nights, in the silence after prayer, was here, in this presence, in this gaze, in this unbearable love. He called my name in the dark and brought me into a light I didn't know existed. And now I know, it was never about leaving something behind. It was about becoming what had always been hidden inside me. I am not lost. I have been found, not by chance, not by accident, but by truth himself. And then he turned my gaze from myself and let me see what was coming. Not just what had been, not just what had broken, but what was breaking open. The air around me thickened again, but this time it pulsed like a heartbeat. The light bent not away from me, but through me. It carried me forward, not with wings, but with vision. And I saw the earth, not the earth of maps and borders, but the aching soul of humanity, suspended in time, weeping beneath the weight of its forgetting. And then, something began to stir. I saw women rising. Women like me, scarred, silenced, hidden. They were rising from ashes, from graves they had not died in, from temples they were never allowed to build. Their mouths were opening, not in anger, but in fire. Their voices cracked the sky, not because they shouted, but because they remembered who they were before they were told to shrink, before they were labeled impure, before they were taught their bodies were shame, their minds were danger, their longing was rebellion. They were veiled in glory, not in cloth. Not one was untouched by pain, but none carried it as chains. They wore it like crowns, bright, broken, holy. I saw men too, forgotten ones, the overlooked, the exiled, the mocked, and their eyes lit with the same knowing. Not pride, not vengeance, but awakening. It spread like wildfire, not destruction. Revelation, not church, not mosque, not temple, but heart, set aflame. The sleepers stirred, and when they woke, they did not scream. They sang songs older than war, songs deeper than doctrine, songs that only souls could understand. I saw veils fall, not of modesty, but of blindness, layers upon layers of tradition, fear, and falsehood, peeling away until only the face of truth remained. And the name above every name, was spoken again, not by force, not by conversion, but by recognition. Jesus. Not the Jesus of political fights or historical arguments, not the Jesus painted on walls or trapped in religion, but the Jesus who knew each soul before breath, the Jesus who had called my name in the dark, the Jesus who now whispered across every land, every tongue, every heart, return to the fire. I saw a new earth forming, not as fantasy, but as consequence. The world had been scorched by lies. Now it was being rebuilt, not with tools, but with truth. Each awakened heart was a stone, each cry of repentance a foundation, each act of love a doorway, not built by religion, not governed by fear, but bound together in the rhythm of one voice. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. And it was shaking. Mountains crumbled, not in wrath, but in release. Old systems collapsed, but in their ruin, I saw gardens blooming. The poor were seated at tables that had once rejected them. The broken were leading those who had once judged them. Children were preaching. Widows were prophesying. Exiles were healing. Former enemies were embracing with tears on their faces, an eternity in their breath. It was not a revival. It was a rebirth. And through it all, I heard the whisper again, growing louder now, like a chant echoing in the marrow of all creation. They were chosen. They will rise. They were chosen. They will rise. They were chosen. They will rise. And I knew this was the reason I had been sent back. Not just to survive, not just to testify, but to call the others, to call those who had heard the whisper but silenced it, to call those who had felt the fire but fled from it, to call those who had cried into pillows, thinking God had turned away. No, he had never turned. He had always been calling. He called my name in the dark, and now, through me, he was calling yours. I woke beneath white light, not the kind I had seen in the presence of glory, but the harsh, humming kind that buzzes above hospital ceilings, where the holy feels far, and everything sacred feels sterile. The sheets beneath me were cold, the air sharp, the pain in my body suddenly loud, but the ache in my spirit was louder. I blinked slowly, like a child crawling back into flesh. The weight of gravity returned, pressing against my ribs, my skull, my skin, as if the earth itself was reminding me, you are here, again. And with that return came silence, a deep, echoing silence that made me question if the light had been a dream, or if this world was the dream I had just awakened from. Nurses passed, machines beeped, voices muttered just beyond the curtain, but no one looked me in the eyes. No one knew that I had crossed the veil. No one saw that I came back carrying fire. When they asked what happened, I tried to speak it, but the words fell like stones from my tongue. Heavy, awkward, unbelieved. I said, I saw him. They said, she's traumatized. I said, he called my name in the dark. They said, she needs rest. My friends looked at me differently. Some avoided me. Others cried when I spoke. They weren't crying from joy. They were crying like something had been lost in me. I tried to explain, not to convince, just to testify, to keep my vow. But the more I spoke, the more they pulled away. They called me confused, delusional, possessed. My father wept like a man who had lost his honor. My mother prayed louder, as if her volume could drown out my transformation. And the more I stood in truth, the more the world twisted to silence me. I began to notice the shadows, not metaphorical ones, but real, lingering at the edges of light. At first in dreams, then in waking. My devices malfunctioned. Screens froze when I typed his name. Audio skipped when I tried to record my testimony. Photos disappeared. Files corrupted. My voice muted by things I could not name. And strangers, they came. Not in person, not yet, but in comments, in emails, in DMs, mocking, threatening, some pretending to help, only to twist my story and turn it into spectacle. I became a warning, a heretic, a her wound too loud to ignore. And still, he spoke, in dreams that felt more real than morning. In visions that burned behind my eyelids even when I closed my eyes. I saw rivers drying, cities trembling, people running from fire. But the fire was not judgment. It was truth. I saw a scroll being unsealed, with names, not of saints or sinners, but of witnesses. And mine was there, still glowing. I heard him say, not with voice but with knowing. Speaking the truth carries a cost. And I knew, this was the price. Not death, but isolation. Not torment, but misunderstanding. The hardest part was not what I lost. It was what I still loved, but had to leave behind. Family, familiarity, the safety of silence, the illusion of acceptance. But I remembered what I had promised, that if he brought me back, if he gave me breath, I would use it for this, to speak, even if they did not listen, to remember, even if they called me mad, to burn, even if they tried to smother the flame, because he called my name in the dark. And when the world tried to bury me, he raised me, not to be worshipped, not to be followed, but to bear witness, to say aloud what others only dare to whisper, that the veil is thinner than we think, that the fire is real, that Jesus lives, that he is calling, still. And I am just one voice, but I will not let it go silent. Not now, not after what I saw, not after what I heard, not after what he gave me, because when he called my name in the dark, he called it so I would speak into yours. Return to the fire, return to the fire, return to the fire. There is a war coming. Not a war of bombs, not of bullets, not of borders, but a war for your soul, a war for your attention, your allegiance, your identity, a war for the one thing that can't be stolen, only surrendered, your truth. And the battlefield is quiet. It looks like routine. It sounds like polite agreement. It smells like incense and stained rituals passed down without fire. But make no mistake, this war is real, and it is raging even now. They will tell you there is peace in silence. But silence is not peace when it hides truth. They will tell you that obedience is safety. But safety is a lie when it costs you your soul. They will tell you to stay inside the walls of tradition, to fear the fire. But I tell you, the fire is where he waits. I saw it. I walked through it. And I came back with this message. Not for all, but for you. Because if you're hearing this, it's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. It's a calling. You were chosen to hear this. Chosen to remember. Chosen to awaken. Chosen to carry light where others would rather keep the shadows. They will say, but this is not what we were taught. I say, examine what you were taught. Not with rebellion but with reverence. Not to destroy but to uncover. Open the pages they said not to open. Ask the questions they told you were dangerous. Follow the voice that trembles through your bones at 3 a.m. The one whispering, return to the fire. There is no safety in silence. No salvation in tradition. Only truth can free you. And truth wears a name. A name that burns without consuming. Jesus. Not the Jesus wrapped in politics. Not the Jesus caged in stained glass. But the Jesus who walks through walls. Who visits the wounded in the night. Who speaks in visions. And shatters lies with a glance. The Jesus who called my name in the dark. And calls yours now. He does not ask you for perfection. He asks for permission. To awaken you. To fill the cracked places. To make the pain holy. To call you home. Not to a religion. To himself. Return to the fire. Return to the word. Return to the one who knows your real name. The one that was spoken before you were born. And will echo long after this world is ash. Return. Because the time is short. The shaking has begun. And what is not built in truth will not stand. So I say it now, not in anger, but in aching love. The time is now. Choose. This isn't just my story. It's yours. You may not have bled where I bled. You may not have floated beyond your body, or heard your soul weep in the sky, but you have felt the fire, haven't you? That holy discontent, that knowing deep in the marrow, that there's more, that the veil is thin, that this world is not the end, but a door. Once the veil lifts, you will never be the same. You will never unsee, never unfeel, never unbelong again. And now that you've heard, you cannot unhear. The voice is calling, again, softly, surely, from the other side of silence. He called my name in the dark, and now, he is calling yours. Will you rise, or will you remain asleep? The time is now. Choose. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return. If this testimony stirred something inside you, something ancient, something holy, do not let it fade. Subscribe to NDE Tales HQ for more sacred confessions like this. Share this video if the Spirit moved through you. Your soul is not an accident. You were brought here to remember. The veil is lifting. The fire is calling. The time is now. Choose.